You're listening to This Real English podcast. Real conversations, real English, real learning.
Okay, think back to maybe English class in school. Remember all those grammar rules? Things like never end a sentence with a preposition, or, I don't know, don't start a sentence with but. Well, what if I told you a lot of those rules you maybe learned? They aren't actually rules at all. Maybe they're more like guidelines. Or sometimes, just myths. So today that's our mission. And we're going to pull out the key insights about these common English grammar rules. The ones that are actually way more flexible than you might think. The goal, help you communicate more confidently, more effectively, maybe lose some of that grammar anxiety.
That really is the key, isn't it? And here's the bombshell, maybe. Grammar isn't some rigid set of commandments carved in stone. It's alive. It's constantly evolving, like language itself. And to really get it, you need to understand this difference. Prescriptive grammar, that's the kind that tells you how language should be, the rules as regulations kind, versus descriptive grammar, which is more about observing how people actually use language. It looks for patterns, rules as regularities, if you will.
Okay, so prescriptive is the shoulds, descriptive is the is.
Exactly. And a lot of those shoulds, those regulations you learned, they're kind of historical baggage. Sometimes they come from way back, like the 17th century, people trying to make English fit Latin grammar rules, which it doesn't. Or sometimes they just came from the pet peeves of self-anointed mavens. Someone just didn't like something.
Huh. Okay, so if grammar isn't fixed, how does language change then? What makes it evolve?
Oh, it's a whole mix of things. Big societal shifts play a role, changing cultural norms. And, especially these days, technology. Huge factor. How people use language, where they use it, that changes things.
Right.
Think about texting or social media, like X, Twitter with character limits.
Right.
That directly pushes towards less formal language, more abbreviations, acronyms maybe taking the place of full sentences sometimes. It's not grammar falling apart, it's grammar adapting. It's showing how flexible it is, how it responds to how we actually live and talk to each other.
Okay, so understanding that flexibility, that evolution, why does that matter for you listening right now? Well, it gives you more freedom, right? You're not trapped by these old, maybe irrelevant ideas. It becomes less about rigidly following rules and more about clarity. Professionalism, sure, but also just connecting with your audience effectively. Knowing when a rule is actually flexible lets you make choices that make your message stronger, not just, correct, according to some outdated standard. All right, so we've got the foundation, prescriptive versus descriptive. Now let's dive into some of those specific myths. This is where it gets really interesting.
Yes, this one. Probably one of the most famous rules, and honestly, it's just not true in modern English. You absolutely can end a sentence with a preposition. In fact, trying too hard to avoid it. That often leads to really awkward phrasing. Overly formal, maybe even sounds like Yoda, for what are you waiting? Instead of
Yes, what are you waiting for? Yeah, much more natural.
Exactly. And our sources point out lots of places where it's perfectly normal, even better passive sentences like, she enjoys being fussed over. Or relative clauses, that's the commitment they're taking on. Infinitives, he had no one to play with. And of course, questions, what music are you interested in? Perfectly fine.
I definitely remember tying myself in knots in school papers trying to avoid that. Sentences ended up sounding so stiff. And it really is that Latin thing again, isn't it? Trying to impose a structure from a different language onto English. Didn't Churchill supposedly say something about that famous quote?
This is the sort of nonsense up with which I will not put the line.
Yes.
Whether he actually said it is debated, but it perfectly captures the absurdity of clinging to that rule rigidly.
It really does. But okay, even if it's not a hard rule, are there times when maybe you should avoid it? Just for, audience reasons.
That's a fair point. It always comes back to context and audience. If you know you're writing for someone very traditional, maybe an older editor, or in a super formal, specific context, you might choose to rephrase. Awareness is key. But for 99% of communication, go ahead. End that sentence with a preposition. If it sounds natural, let it go.
Okay, next up. Starting sentences with and or but. Oh man, I think my third grade teacher would faint. Is this one real?
No, not really. This falls firmly into the category of stylistic preference, not a grammatical law. The thinking behind it was, well, conjunctions join things, right? Clauses, phrases. So starting a sentence with one must mean it's a fragment.
But it doesn't have to be.
Not at all. Actually, the Chicago Manual of Style, a pretty authoritative source, they estimate something like 10% of the finest sentences ever written began with a conjunction. Writers use it all the time, for emphasis, for flow, to create a dramatic effect.
So again, it's not about breaking a rule. It's about using a technique, knowing the impact it has.
Precisely. You're making a stylistic choice. Now, could you overdo it? Sure. In some very formal writing, maybe use it sparingly.
Right.
But for most writing, starting a sentence with and or but for impact or transition, totally fine. It's a tool in your toolkit. Right, this one's a bit trickier. There's a kernel of truth here, but it's often misunderstood. So if you use two negative words to express just one negative idea, like, I don't have no money, then yes, technically they cancel out. I don't have no money logically means I do have some money. That's why standard English avoids this structure in formal settings.
Okay, so that part is generally true. Don't use two negatives if you only mean one negative.
Correct.
Right.
However, and this is the important part, double negatives are perfectly grammatical and actually quite common when they're used deliberately to express an affirmative idea, usually through understatement or denial.
How does that work?
Think about saying, I couldn't not help him. That doesn't mean I didn't help him.
No, it means you felt you had to help him, like strongly.
Exactly. It reinforces the positive. It's stronger in a way than just saying, I could help him or I decided to help him. It conveys that sense of obligation or inevitability.
That makes sense. So the intent matters.
Mm-hmm.
Which leads us to, what about song lyrics like Ain't No Sunshine? That's a double negative expressing a single negative. Right. And that brings up ain't? Is ain't a real word? We were always told it wasn't.
Ain't. Yes, it is a real word. You'll find it in dictionaries. It actually has a long history. It was meant to ain't in the 17th century, a contraction for am not.
Yeah.
Over time, its use expanded. So now people use it as a contraction for am not, is not, are not, even has not, have not in some dialects.
So grammatically, it functions correctly as a contraction.
It does, but, and this is a big but, it carries a lot of social stigma. It's often called, maybe dramatically, the most powerful social marker in English. It's strongly associated with informal speech and often, unfortunately, with lower levels of education or social standing in the eyes of some listeners.
So technically okay, but socially loaded.
Very much so. So the advice is pretty clear. Avoid ain't in any kind of formal writing or professional setting. In casual speech among friends, people use it, but be aware of the perception.
Okay, let's boldly go to the next myth. Splitting infinitives. Captain Kirk's famous mission statement, to boldly go. Was he a grammatical rebel or just speaking normally?
He was mostly just speaking normally, honestly. Splitting an infinitive just means putting an adverb between to and the verb, like to quickly read or to really understand. The objections cropped up, mid-19th century, and the reasons were, well, a bit weak. Some just thought it sounded funny. And again, there was that comparison to Latin where infinitives are single words, so you physically can't split them, but English isn't Latin.
So it's not really a grammar error.
Most experts today, people like Bill Bryson, they'd say no. It's maybe a stylistic choice, potentially a rhetorical fault if it sounds awkward, but not a grammatical sin. In fact, sometimes not splitting the infinitive can make the sentence ambiguous or just sound silly, or it changes the meaning.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Compare, you have to really watch him. That probably means you need to watch him closely, pay attention.
Okay.
Versus, you really have to watch him. That shifts the emphasis. Now it means it's very important that you watch him. The really modifies have to.
I see the difference. The placement of the adverb matters for meaning. Our sources mentioned the Time Style Guide had a practical take on this too.
Yes, they often do.
It was something like, split infinitives are to be avoided but are not banned. And that sometimes avoiding the split makes things less clear. But generally, try to keep it intact if it works fine.
That sounds about right. Pragmatic advice.
So the takeaway seems to be, use your judgment. Does splitting it sound better? Does it make the meaning clearer? Then it's probably fine. Don't twist your sentence into knots just to avoid it.
This one, Let's clear this up quickly. Yes, you absolutely can start a sentence with hopefully. It's perfectly acceptable in modern English.
Okay, straightforward.
It's what we call a sentence adverb. It modifies the whole sentence, expressing the speaker's attitude. Hopefully it won't rain tomorrow means I hope it won't rain. There was a time when some grammarians objected to sentence adverbs generally, but that's largely past. The specific fuss about hopefully was a bit technical. Some argued it should mean in a hopeful manner, but its use as it is to be hoped won out. Language changed, usage shifted, it's standard now.
Good to know. Another one bites the dust. The passive voice. I think almost everyone has had a teacher warn them against this one. Use the active voice. It's stronger, clearer.
Yes, that advice is very common, especially in American English writing guides. But honestly, the passive voice is a completely valid grammatical construction, and it's incredibly useful.
Useful how? When would you actually want to use it?
Well, think about situations where the action itself, or the person or thing receiving the action, is more important than who did it. It's common in scientific papers, for example. The solution was heated to 100 degrees Celsius. You don't need to say the researcher heated the solution. The focus is on the process.
Right, the what happened, not the who did it.
Exactly. Or in formal reports, official documents. Sometimes the actor is unknown, or maybe you want to deliberately de-emphasize them. Think about news reporting. Mistakes were made. That's passive. It avoids pointing fingers directly.
Okay, so there's a strategic reason. It's not just weak or evasive necessarily.
Precisely. Compare Spain beat Brazil in the final. That's active, focus on Spain winning. With Brazil was beaten in the final, passive. Now the focus shifts to Brazil and the outcome for them.
So why does it get such a bad rap then? If it's useful.
It's a good question. Sometimes it can be used vaguely or make sentences wordier. An active voice often is more direct and dynamic, but the advice to never use passive is just rational. It's an oversimplification. It's a tool. Knowing when and why to use it is part of effective writing. It's not inherently flawed. And another quick one here. The idea that whose can only refer to people, not true.
So you can use whose for inanimate objects.
Absolutely. And often, it's the best option. Consider this example. They reached a row of houses whose gardens overlooked the park. Trying to avoid whose there gets really awkward. You'd have to say something like, the gardens of which overlook the park.
Yeah, that sounds clunky.
Right. Whose is smoother, more natural. It's always been used for things as well as people, so feel free to use it.
Okay, and just briefly, we also came across a couple of other common points in our research, like using they as a singular pronoun.
Yes, that's become very widely accepted now. Using singular they to refer to a person when their gender is unknown or irrelevant, or if they use they as their pronoun, it avoids that awkward he or she.
Much smoother, and the whole I versus me confusion.
That just comes down to basic sentence structure. Is the pronoun the subject doing the action, I went, John and I went, or the object receiving it? Give it to me, between John and me. Simple check usually clears it up.
And lastly, sometimes style choices get mistaken for rules, like avoiding alliteration.
Right. Alliteration repeating consonant sounds isn't forbidden. It's a stylistic device. Overuse it, and yeah, it can be distracting. But used intentionally, it can add emphasis, rhythm, even humor. It's about knowing why you're using it, not just banning it.
Wow. Okay, so pulling this all together, what's the big message for you, the listener? It seems like real grammar skill isn't just memorizing a list of rigid, unchanging rules. That fair?
Absolutely. It's much more about understanding the context you're writing or speaking in. Who's your audience? What's your purpose? Good grammar helps you communicate clearly, effectively. It's a resource.
And being accurate definitely helps with credibility, right?
Yeah.
Especially in professional settings.
No question. Accuracy matters. Professionalism matters. But you also need to remember that language isn't static. It keeps changing. So the best approach is probably to embrace that fluidity. Keep learning, read good writing, pay attention to how language is actually being used around you. Get feedback, adapt.
Which kind of leads to a final thought, something for you to maybe ponder after this. With communication getting faster, shorter, think AI writing tools, emojis, super short video captions, how is that going to keep pushing and reshaping what we even consider correct grammar? What does all this change mean for the purpose of grammar itself as language keeps evolving online and everywhere else? Something to think about.